Whenever you are ready, go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, good afternoon. I am Chastity Boyce. I'm actually very excited to be with you this afternoon. I have the pleasure of being able to work with Tiffany and Chastity on a regular basis and pretty consistently, but I don't have the opportunity all the time to sit down and hear all of their career advice and the advice of, how you make it through law school and what's happening just currently in the world and how you find balance, right, to do that and be really effective in your job, but then also do the things that you're passionate about and make sure that you are paving a way for folks coming behind you. So those are the things that we're going to talk about today, and I'm really excited to get started. But before I do that, I want to say a little bit more about the Belonging Project. So the word Ubuntu became popular worldwide during apartheid as Bishop Desmond Tutu explained a philosophy in multiple South African ethnic groups that our humanity derives from the humanity of the collective. Ubuntu symbolizes the universal bond we have as a people and the focus on collective responsibility. Just as the pandemic has illustrated how interdependent we are, this collective is focused on working together to move forward in our shared commitment to improving inclusion and diversity in the legal profession. We believe that we rise and fall together. Built on this concept, the Belonging Project is a collaborative network of professional and personal support for diverse legal talent across industry organizations and law firms. Through the Belonging Project, we are offering opportunities and programs to support diverse law students and lawyers during the pandemic. This initiative will contribute to diversity in the legal profession and encourage others to contribute and leverage their expertise and resources. In collaboration with our industry partners, we will offer webinars focused on professional and personal development, one-on-one coaching, and a curated resource center devoted to well-being and professional growth. So I can speak, I think, on behalf of the two women that we're in conversation with today to say that we are honored to be a part of the Belonging Project conversation and to have the opportunity to chat just a little bit about our various paths and our contributions, right, to building diversity and inclusion in the profession. And really, right, since this is targeted at law students, giving you guys some advice and some tips for how you're going to continue to make it through and really carve your path here in the profession. So without further ado, I want to start our conversation. We're so lucky today to be in conversation with Chastity Wilson Henry, who is a Senior Vice President and General Counsel and Corporate Secretary of SECO Environmental Corporation, and Tiffany Harper, who is First Deputy Treasurer, Chief of Staff, and General Counsel to the City of Chicago Treasurer. Those are their day jobs, right? Chastity Henry is also a founder of the New Roundtable, and Tiffany Harper is a co-founder of DAP and DAP Direct. I don't want to take away their shine, and there's so much more to their story, so I'm going to give them some time to introduce themselves, and then after that, we'll jump in and we'll start the conversation. So Chastity, why don't we start with you?
Thanks, Chastity. I'm still getting used to someone with my exact name, even though we've known each other for years at this point and talk often. Thank you for the introduction, and it is a pleasure to be here with everyone this afternoon. I wholeheartedly believe in the mission and focus of the Belonging Project, and happy to be here with these two ladies to share some of our journey. My background is that I'm from Fort Worth, Texas. That's not far from Dallas, where I still practice law today, and went to college outside of Chicago in the suburb of Wheaton, Illinois, at Wheaton College, and then came back home for law school at the University of Texas. I started out after law school at a large corporate law firm called Vinson & Elkins. At first practicing litigation, but then switching over to M&A and securities once I figured out that I wanted to be a general counsel someday. So stick a pin in that when talking about kind of shifting gears as your goals take shape. That's what I did. And then I've been in-house ever since I left the law firm in 2010. I'm on my fourth in-house stop, and hopefully stay here for a while as the general counsel of SECO Environmental Corp since March. And that's a little bit about me up front, and I'm sure we'll get into more details later.
Thank you, Chastity. Tiffany?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I'm Tiffany Harper. I'm originally from Chicago. I went to Dartmouth for undergrad and WashU in St. Louis for law school. I graduated in 2008, so I was all set to be a litigator. That's what I thought I was going to do, and then the economy crashed, and I was immediately carted over to the corporate bankruptcy and restructuring group at the large law firm where I was working. I love that work. It gave me an opportunity to do transactional and litigation at the time. And then I clerked for a federal judge. I also have had 2 in-house stints. And so I probably at this point am more like a finance attorney, but I have that corporate bankruptcy and risk background. So excited to kind of talk about my journey today and what I do.
Awesome. So you guys are really just touching the tip of the iceberg, and you've made lots of pivots in your career. So I'm hoping that we get a chance to talk about that. For those of you who are joining us, please feel free to use the Q&A box. We have some questions and some things that we'll talk about that we hopefully will create for you a conversation that flows, and hopefully, right, it appears to be a conversation amongst friends. But if there are things that you want to know, please do use that chat box, and I'll be monitoring that from time to time. And if there's something that we absolutely have to get to and I need to stop the conversation to make sure we do, we will. Otherwise, we'll save some time at the end and try to make sure we get to those questions. So let's jump in. I really do want to dive in and talk about your careers, but I want people to understand kind of what your vision or thought was when you first decided that you wanted to go to law school. So tell us a little bit about why you decided to go to law school and what made you choose the law school that you did.
Lady wants to go first.
I'm sorry, I'll kick it off. Tiffany, you go first.
Okay. I was like, am I going? So my whole life I said I was going to be a doctor. I went to college and everything was great. Biology, the math classes, organic chemistry, and then I got to inorganic chemistry and it was like tough and I hated it. And so I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do. And so one of my professors encouraged me to go to a hospital and like volunteer. And I had never done that before. And so I went to the hospital and volunteered. And I was like, I hate it here. It's blood and it's crazy and I don't feel comfortable. And so I knew I wasn't going to be a doctor. That same year, I went abroad and I studied abroad for a year in Brazil, in Salvador and Bahia, so northern Brazil. And so I spent a lot of time there just fighting for like civil rights and various civil injustices that happened there while I was a student, but also just in like my personal individual capacity. And I wrote a thesis about the difference between racism in Brazil and America. And so in doing a lot of that work and being abroad, I was like, oh, I think I can do this. I can do this for real. Like I can argue before the Supreme Court. I can like fight for people's rights. That's what I told myself. So when I got back, the beginning of my senior year, I have no lawyers in my family, and I was like, oh, I'm just going to apply to law school and see what happens. If I don't get in anywhere, then, I'll just get a job and I'll figure it out from there. So I kind of went to law school very much so on a whim. It was kind of after this experience and floundering, after being pre-med and that just finding out that just wasn't going to work for me because I didn't like blood and I didn't like hospitals. And then in terms of how I chose my law school, this is probably really bad. Don't ever follow this. But I applied to a lot of law schools and I got into a bunch of places. And WashU in St. Louis was close enough to Chicago. And so I'll never forget, my dad drove me for like an admitted students day. And we pulled up and I said to him, oh my gosh, Dad, this looks like Dartmouth. And he was like, yeah, that must feel so comfortable. And that's literally how I selected the law school. It just felt like my undergrad institution. That's probably not the way you should select law school. So I'll say that again, but that's exactly how I selected mine.
Let's stick a pin in that because I think that's going to be important to come back to. So Chastity, what about you?
Yeah, I actually have a similarities to Tiffany's story, and I don't know if we've ever talked about it before, but growing up, I wanted to be either a lawyer or a doctor. It mainly stemmed from, I didn't have a lot of examples of either of those growing up. And, we were a working class family. My father was working class, and my parents had me young and didn't attend college, but they always instilled in us that we were going to get our education, we were going to attend college, we were going to get a good, stable job and have a career. And so that was built into us from the very beginning. And so I went to the High School for Medical Professions. It's a magnet school in Fort Worth, and got to spend time with doctors at hospitals doing rotations. And that's how I quickly figured out that I did not want to be a doctor after all, similar to Tiffany. And so I set my sights back on being an attorney and not knowing any attorney. Just kind of did tons of online research. I was just obsessed. And we didn't even have high speed back then. It was, dial up, AOL, very slow. But I did it. I stayed researching and figured out kind of what I needed to do in college to get to a good law school. I knew being from Texas and wanting to practice law in Texas, I wanted to go to our flagship law school, the University of Texas, and kind of what it took to get there. And so started my sophomore and junior year studying for that, working toward that. I applied to several schools, but the day I got into Texas, it was like I won the lottery. And so I was so happy and I knew exactly where I was going. And so that's how I ended up back at UT for law school.
That's great. So both of you, it sounds like you didn't really know, right? In the sense that you didn't have a path or someone who had set the footprint for you of what to do and how to do this. As I know you ladies now grown, I feel like you're both very strategic, right? In how you move throughout your career. So did you have a plan for law school, right? And how to be successful? And if not, what got you to the point where you realized you needed some strategy in how you pivoted throughout your careers? I can just rotate. Chastity, do you want to go?
We're both so polite. We don't want to speak over each other. So, sure. Like I said, this goes back to my online research that I did a lot. I stayed in chat rooms about law schools, Googling. We may not have even had Google back then, but kind of mapping out a plan as I was a junior or senior in college as to how to attack law school. And I ran across a lot of different things, but one early on was the IRAC method that I had, saw some people talking about in the chat room and then looked into it. And there were there were these kits that you can order to help you practice how to begin to write law school essays. I can't remember the name of it. I think it was called LEWS, the LEEWS method. It was a long time ago now. But anyway, suffice it to say, I ordered one of those kits and it came. And I spent the summer before law school practicing writing essays, knowing that I had a plan for getting canned outlines instead of starting from scratch. So I'd be sitting in the back of the class as a 1L with the answers already, and not only with the answers, but with the big picture, because I knew where we were going in con law and not just piecemeal spoon feeding of issues in case law. And so all that to say, I learned all that just from doing some online research and really did have a plan of attack. The first year of law school, it resulted in a lot of people thinking I was antisocial, not really hanging out in the lobby with the people I'd really be cool with later on, but knowing that first semester was my shot and I wasn't going to throw that away. And if I did well that first semester, I was pretty much set in terms of jobs for the rest of law school. So I focused all my efforts and energy there. And my plan was really how to attack those first 4 months of law school.
Okay. So I'm the underachiever then. I definitely did not have a plan. The summer before law school, I was at Dartmouth, and they have this program called the SEED program that basically brings students who have never been exposed to college to the summer. So I worked up until with these students from all across the country until maybe 2 days before law school. So I never thought about what it was going to be like or what my plan of attack was going to be. I think the thing that kind of jolted me to reality is that I had a roommate in law school who went to Dartmouth with me, and both of her parents were lawyers and her grandparents were judges. And so the day that we moved in, she moved in with all of these horn books and all of these materials, and she had 2 sets of textbooks so she could read at school and then not have to carry her books home. And I was like, I can't afford 2 sets of textbooks. And so I had very quickly figured out that I was a little, a lot out of my league compared to my classmates who, I met her at an Ivy League school. So not only were most of them, from top tier undergrad institutions, but they also had lawyers and judges and people in their families who were really going to be their foundation for the first semester. And I didn't have any of that. So I quickly figured out that I needed to figure out what I didn't know. And so basically what I did is I used a method where I basically had to go to class, figure out what I was being taught in class, and then like I basically figured out the gaps. So I spent a lot of time, like I was really focused in class. I hand wrote my notes so that I can be full attention. I often read the cases 2 or 3 times, and then I would like hound my professors to be like, I don't get the gap. Like, this is a gap for me. Like, what's the gap for me, right? And I then like formed my own little study group with other diverse students who, mind you, we were all lost, but I was enough of, they still talk to this day about how I used to keep them up at night. Cause I'd be like, no, we're missing something. Right. And so I was just like the little leader, like, no, we can't go to sleep because like this could be on the final and we don't know it. And so it ended up working out for me. Like I did well, and I had a big law job after my 1L year and my 2L year, but I definitely wasn't as prepared as Chastity. I didn't know what I was getting into. It wasn't until I got to school and realized like, hey, I'm the little Black girl from Chicago that doesn't know any lawyers, and I have no idea what's going on. And unless I take this thing by the reins right now, I can see why I will end up at the bottom of the class, not because I'm not smart, or not because I don't have like the mental capacity to do this. I'm going to end up there because it might take me a semester to figure out what's going on. And so that was really kind of my journey to law school. If I wish Chastity Henry had gone to my school and been my friend.
No, you wouldn't have been my friend. You wouldn't have wanted to be my friend.
I'm sitting here like I just wish I would have had one of the 2 strategies when I was in law school. But this is why I'm smart enough now, right, to recognize you guys as peer mentors and have you in my network to help me figure out how to navigate now. So then you talked a little bit, both of you, right, about how those strategies worked out for you. And Tiffany, you said that you had a big law job right after your first and second year. So tell us a little bit about the strategies you took to. Actually, let's fast forward. Let's talk about your job now, right, and the strategies that you took in law school and whether you've utilized any of those throughout your career to get to this job where you are currently. Tiffany?
Yeah, I think law school is a big exercise in figuring out, like I said, the gaps. You have to very quickly figure out what you don't know, or else you will succumb to what you don't know. I think that goes with the practice of law as well. That very quickly, you have to figure out what you don't know, and sometimes what your clients don't tell you or can't tell you, right? Because they don't know, right? And so no matter if it's a corporate client or a litigation client, very quickly figuring out like where you are and from what position you're going to fight and argue and negotiate is so critical. And so I think I had to figure that out just from being, a Black woman in law school. I had to figure out very quickly like where I was in the totem pole and how I was going to get like, I get that I'm starting like 30 steps behind, but I'm going to end up at the same finish line, and how I'm going to do that. I think that very much so is my day-to-day job. When I go to work every day at City Hall, there's going to be a myriad of problems that present themselves. The biggest one has been COVID, right? I manage an entire staff, and like I have to figure out how to manage a $10 billion investment portfolio, how to wire $400 million a day, and how to do all of the accounting functions for a city without an ability to have my staff in the same place. And this is the government. So like not everyone has like a work issued laptop. We don't all have phones. So in the way that corporate America was probably able to adjust because they already had the bells and whistles, it took me I spent the month of February trying to figure out how I could get high speed internet in people's houses, how I could pivot in the way. And so I think it's critical, the skills that law school teaches you about how to be in a situation and how to think your way out of a problem, out of a box that seems impossible, is something that you will be doing for the rest of your legal career. As you climb the ladder, that's all you do all day is people dump problems in your lap, and you're calm, you're professional, and you figure it out, and you know how to where you're starting from, what the end game is, and you get better and better with it. There's few things that shock me. COVID didn't shock me. I was like, oh, this is a pandemic, we're going to figure it out, right? But that comes with time and with practice. And so I think that a big part of what law school does is to prepare you to be that person, to basically be that thinker and that problem solver in crisis. And you get good at it, and especially in roles like the ones that we have.
Completely agree with that, Tiffany. It's so true what you said about always knowing where the gaps are, where your blind spots are, and how to address those, because they will always be there. People are under the notion that just because you are, leading a big department or you're a GC, that you have all the answers and you know all the gaps. No, you just know what you don't know. And that's the first step in identifying those gaps. And also, in law school, just like today, you're constantly hit with information. Information is coming from everywhere, email, phone calls, you're reading stuff. And you have to quickly synthesize that information, sort through what's helpful, what's not, what's true, what's not. And then the output needs to be a plan, a strategy, a plan of attack, and how we're going to address issues. And there are hundreds of issues, not just one issue. And so then you have to prioritize those issues. Same within law school. They expected you to go through a whole semester of reading cases. Let's take con law, for instance, learning about the Constitution, the various amendments, case law, and then synthesize that into you being an expert on a 2-hour exam on con law and answering all the questions and bringing all of that information to bear on solving the problem. Same thing happens every day. So much information, so much stimulus. People don't know what they don't know. They don't know how to provide you, to Tiffany's point, the facts in the right way. And so you have to cull those out. You have to ask the right questions. You have to pressure test people's assumptions. And then you have to say, okay, here's what we're going to do. And so one thing you do have to do is be comfortable making decisions, and making decisions based on sometimes and oftentimes not enough information. But you need to be comfortable, you need to be confident, and you need to follow through on whatever plan you've outlined with input from your team, from various stakeholders, et cetera. But at the end of the day, something goes wrong, they're looking at you. And so you need to be comfortable that you have synthesized all the information and made sound decisions and taking ownership if something does go wrong and learning from that. But those are all skills, to Tiffany's point, that began in law school and that you use throughout your career. And every day is an opportunity to practice, to hone those skills, and to get better.
That was powerful. Tiffany touched a little bit on the pandemic, but I think the things that you said, right, about the expectations that exist for you, Chastity, when you guys are in these types of roles is really important. And I want to add a spin to it and talk about a different layer. So can you tell me a little bit about how you think being a Black woman, right, affects the expectations that exist for you internally at your organizations, but then also externally to the larger legal profession?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much to unpack there. I'll just talk about a little bit of it. We're, as Black women in this profession, we're used to walking into a room or into a meeting and getting a double take, like, one, why are you here? And, oh, you're the GC, or you are this person, or you're making decisions here. And so there's the element of being one of very few, being not expected to be in the role you're in, and then being undermined because you are there and certain people may not think you deserve it or may not think you should be there. And so you bring all of that to bear on being calm and collected and making sound decisions in this setting, right? And so it's a lot to deal with. And it's a lot of it is internal, right? Because a long time ago, I stopped trying to decipher people's intent, right? When they said something to me that's out of line or sent a crazy email, I stopped trying to decide whether they did it because I'm Black or I'm a woman. The fact is they did it and it's unacceptable, and we're going to handle it and let people know how they need to interact with me, how they need to treat me, and what my role is here. But the thing is, our counterparts often don't have to think about all of those things. They come into the room and they're them. They're just themselves. And if they make a mistake, they're making a mistake. Or if they do something well, they're doing it well. We're coming into the room, we representing other Black women, let's be honest. We're representing Black women in leadership. And if there is a misstep, we know that that is going to be brought to bear as a perception of other Black women. And we've got that burden. We've also got that opportunity, though, because when we do step up and when we do lead, it furthers the truth to the notion that Black women can lead and are very good leaders, are excellent leaders at all levels of society. And so those are just things, though, we have to keep in mind. We can't just make a decision. We got to think about all of this. And that's tough.
Tiffany, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'll share a story that's just, I think there's an additional burden that I think you just have to learn how to deal with. But I'll say, so, I work in City Hall, and for the past 2 weeks, every time I go to work, mind you that I've been working there for almost a year and a half, and I'm, one of the most senior Black women that go into the building every day. So there are several police officers that asked me for my ID, throughout the day, multiple times. And the first couple of weeks, I kind of let it go because I'm like, oh, maybe I look different. But this kind of continued as a pattern. And then last week I walked into City Hall and I did my temperature scan, and there were 3 white men behind me. And so I said, you know what, I'm gonna actually test this out. Let me see what happens. So of course I get to pass through, and they ask me for my ID, and I pull out my ID. Mind you, my ID is green, and there are only 20 people in the entire city that have a green ID because you have to be a deputy. So I'm like, okay. So I pull out my green ID, which I have done for the last couple of weeks at the checkpoint, and then I walk a little bit forward and I wait to see what they do with these 3 white guys behind me. And so I walk through, and he's like, oh, go ahead, guys, go ahead. And so at that moment, after 2 weeks of going through that, I decided, oh, this was the time. So I called the mayor's chief of staff, who there's 3 citywide elected officials. They all have chiefs of staff. I'm the only one who's Black. I'm the only one who's a Black woman. And so I called the mayor's chief of staff, who's a white man, and I'm like, come down here because I have to tell you something, and this is ridiculous. So he comes downstairs, and I'm like, let me tell you what's been happening for the last 2 weeks. And I didn't say anything, and I tested it myself, but this is what happened today. And so, of course, he worked it out. They were horrified that I was who I was, right? They were like, oh my God, that's somebody's chief of staff that we have been basically for the past 2 weeks, making her show her ID, checking her ID if she walks around. They're like, oh, do you have your ID, ma'am? Who are you? And so I think as a Black woman, there's constantly that struggle between I also have a lot of work to do, right? So I actually don't have time every day to check people when I know that it's because of the body that I'm in that I'm being treated a certain way. And so I think what I have to realize is I can't go to battle every day, right? I won't survive. I won't be whole for myself. I won't be whole for my son, but I pick and choose. And some days are going to be days where I'm going to go to battle over this Black body that I'm in because it matters for people like me and people who are going to come behind me. And other days I'm going to let it go. Other days I'm going to find a different way to work on it. Other days I'm going to focus on my work. And so I think for me, finding that balance, making sure that understanding this is a marathon, not a sprint. I can't fight the world. I can't fight everything. Things are going to be coming at me from all kind of ways as a Black woman in a Black body. I'm very conscious of when I ring the alarm. But when I ring it, I'm in the middle of City Hall with with another chief of staff. And I'm this is unacceptable behavior, and they need to be trained on the fact that just because I am a Black woman, that doesn't mean who they check. If they're going to check everybody, they're going to check everybody, or they're checking nobody. And that presents a security risk. And he totally agreed with me. I mean, they apologized profusely. I mean, it has all happened, but it's an example of kind of the daily decisions we have to make as Black women leaders of I didn't have time for that. I didn't have time for that hour long. It made me work into the night because I took an hour out of my day to have this whole lesson for them. And so it's that balance that I think that people don't realize that we're constantly grappling with because behind this, I have a whole job to do. Right? I actually don't have time to confront unconscious bias and racism every single day, even though it affects me every single day. And so that's the balance I often deal with.
So both of you talked about kind of two things, right? The amount of competence that's needed in your day-to-day job, but then also these moments where people underestimate you, right? Because of being a Black woman, but also the power that you have in the positions. And I don't know about you, but I'm much better, right? 12, 13 years out of law school than I was when I was a baby lawyer in figuring out how to navigate that. So how did you guys start to be able to figure out, when you can use that time, when you should speak up, right? And when does that muscle kind of come into play throughout your career?
Am I going first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So I don't know that I've necessarily figured it out. I think that what I have figured out is that if I have a seat at the table, I have to use it for those that don't have a voice, right? And so I'm very conscious about making sure that everyone is represented. And this is not just for Black women. This is everyone, right? I have worked in positions where, I have been the only minority at the table. That doesn't mean that only Black people should be represented, right? I mean, everybody should have a voice and a place at that table. I think, the hardest part about it is it's a game of chess, right? There will be times when there will be a perfect moment where you should raise an issue because it is an issue, but then you go back to chess and you're like, but will that impact my work? And impacting my work means I'm not here, right? And it's more important for me to be here. So sometimes, I think what I've learned at least is like, I have to learn the balance and I have to build up the political power and the political capital so I can spend it like I need to when I need to. And so I spend a lot of time, I'm a stickler, I was a perfectionist before, but I'm an extra perfectionist because I know that like when I make a mistake, it might mean that nobody else Black gets hired. No other Black woman gets a chance, right? So when I'm checking my work, I'm checking for everybody that's coming behind me. I'm a perfectionist for everybody that's coming behind me. I'm doing that so that I leave a good impression, but also so that I'm building up political capital so that when I have to spend it, like when I have to call somebody downstairs and like out of a meeting, like, no, I need you downstairs right now, it's because I've built up so much political capital with that person and so much of reputational capital with that person that I'm able to leverage it. And so I think that that's the game that we play, and that, you can't like walk into a place and all of a sudden like blow everything up, because that's never going to get you anywhere. It probably get you fired. At the same time, like you have to be very conscious of your work product in a way that other people do not, because little things will be attributed to who you are. And so I'm very conscious of all of that. And I build up, I'm in the game of like building up my political capital, building it. And when I see an opportunity where it needs to be spent, where it's going to protect me and other people like me, I will spend it.
I agree with every single thing you said. I mean, that's so spot on and so true, Tiffany. Yeah, I think the same thing. Oftentimes we have to, the toughest part is to exercise restraint, right? Especially as you go through the leadership ranks and you are a leader at the city of Chicago, in government, in a corporation, right? You have a lot of power, you do, but you cannot go telling everyone what they need to be told, how you like to tell them, because to your point, that's going to just reflect on us. People will be forwarding emails from me left and right saying, see what she said to me or how she talked to me, even though they wouldn't have the full context to know that they absolutely deserve that response, right? So we have to be extra careful. And so Tiffany made so many great points. Being excellent in your work product. All right, my number one job is to be moving the department along, setting a strategic plan, and helping and supporting and bolstering the company's strategic plan. Number one. And so that is what I use the vast majority of my energy on at work. Okay. And so when that's buttoned up, then at that point, I have built up the reputation as an excellent lawyer, as a professional, as someone who knows what she's doing. And then when I use that capital, to Tiffany's point, on pointing out injustice or saying that, what, our culture is broken here because of the way people speak to one another, and especially perhaps the way we talk over women in meetings, et cetera, people are going to listen because I'm not just there to point this stuff out. I'm there to be the outstanding lawyer I am. And also, I happen to have a perspective that is more diverse than a lot of people, or is different from a lot of people, where I can bring that to bear on these conversations. And so when we are in leadership meetings, I can talk about culture. I can talk about how women are treated. I can talk about the perception of our workforce if we don't have the requisite diversity or ethnic diversity or other types of diversity as well. And so I think first things first, and then you have to exercise restraint, and then you need to use it, to Tiffany's point, to protect others, right? Neither Tiffany or I or Chastity have any problem defending ourselves, right? But that's not what we spend a lot of our energy on. We spend our energy looking out for other people who may not have that power, may not have that voice, and making sure that because we were here, they can be here in the future.
That's a great segue, talking about, one, our ability to do that for ourselves, but the importance of doing that for others. So both of you have passion projects that have helped create pathways for others. And as I look at it collectively, right, I think it's very holistic in the sense of creating them for law students and then making sure those networks exist, right, for diverse women and Black women, right, when they get in the profession themselves. So Tiffany, can we start with you and tell us a little bit about why you founded DAP and how DAP is working for diversity in the profession now? And then Chastity, the same question to you, but in regards to, of course, why you got involved with DAP, but in regards to New Roundtable.
Yes. So I keep saying to Chastity Boyce that when we first co-founded DAP, I just never thought it was going to be what it is right now. I don't know. I thought this was like, we have all these little projects that we do together. So I was like, oh, this is just like another little thing we're going to do, in addition to, like, there's a lot of other little things we've done. And so, but when we had the idea to found DAP, it was because literally the legal profession was like bleeding women of color. And we kept going to these like talks, and like people were holding like panels. And so we would go and we would like sip our wine and get our cheese and get our little plate, and we'd like sit around at law firms and listen to people be like, oh my gosh, women of color are in trouble. And we were like, okay, so like how many panels like this are we going to go to until like something happens? And then we realized pretty quickly that like the panels was the action. The discussions with the wine and the cheese, that was the action, as the numbers for women of color were really plummeting. And so we kind of looked at each other and we were like, let's do a pipeline program. And it really was because nothing else was happening. I mean, there was an acknowledgement of the numbers and in relation to the recession, right? People knew the diversity was in trouble. People were talking about it. People were writing about it. There were conferences on it, but there was actually no actual action. And so what Chastity Boyce and I were thinking at the time was, the least we can do is like help the women behind us. Like maybe we can't help the women that are losing their jobs right now and all of the women that are kind of being pushed out of the legal profession, but we can help the women of color who are in law school now and have no way out, who have no idea how to get to a firm job, who are first generation college and law students who have no idea what they're doing. And so when they go for that firm interview, if we prep them and they get the job, they can pull someone else behind them, and we can just keep pulling, and we can keep pulling. And so we started with 3 students, and now, every year we touch hundreds of students, right? And so it was more, it wasn't really an idea of like, oh my gosh, this would be a great thing. This is a great idea, and it's all formulated. It was let's do something because no one else is, and if not us, then who? So that's kind of how we got to founding DAP, and now DAP has several signature programs we're working on. We have a pre-law boot camp where we're trying to help people law students, women of color, as they enter law school. We have our scholars program that we started. Now we have our 7th class that's national. We have 37 students all across the country who are getting, this intensive investment in their futures. And then we have our national DAP Direct Job Fair that for the 4th year running going to be virtual this year. So we're trying to work on every part of the pipeline that we can possibly touch. And Chastity Henry has been a huge part of that, and us launching DAP Direct in Dallas and just being able to provide jobs where there weren't before, right? Like being able to provide opportunity is just the whole name of the game.
Yeah, I'll interject for 1 second just to kind of set you up a little bit, Chastity Henry, because I think part of what we're focusing on in DAP is not only working with law firms to help them understand that there's a plethora, right, of diverse talent, but also really training students, right? Training students to understand how the legal industry works, right? How to navigate these law firm jobs, how to show up there, right, in the various politics that exist, but also how to be excellent, do your research, some of the things that you guys have talked about. But Chastity Henry, I mean, one thing that made us in awe of you was also your commitment to making sure that existed for women while they were practicing, right? So you get the law students there, they've learned this and they've learned how to exist. But I think all of us came into the profession and found that there was still a level of support that was necessary for us to stay there, right, and to maneuver and things like that. So using that, can you talk a little bit about New Roundtable, why you started it and what it is?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, one of the many things I admire and love about Tiffany and Chastity is they are about action. Like Tiffany said, they're not going to convene a bunch of panels with wine and cheese. We're going to quickly get down to the business of we see a problem and what do we do about it. I love that about them. I found out about DAP through reading about it. A friend of mine sent me an article and I proceeded to all the way stalk both of them on social media and, send them messages because I have a pretty good network and I couldn't get anyone to get me directly in touch with them. So I was like, how can I get in touch? And finally, one of them responded to my email. They were probably just wanting to, or to my LinkedIn message. They probably were like, let's just get this woman to stop reaching out to us and just, see what she wants. And thankfully they did because, I wanted to be a part of that. Whatever they were doing was working. They were actually out there helping students and getting things done. And so I was so happy to join in on their efforts and help with that endeavor. And so it's the same concept with the New Roundtable. In Dallas, about 6 years ago now, we started a group just based on the concept of action. We would get together, and when I say we were mid-level associates and in-house counsel in Dallas at corporations and at law firms. We'd get together and we'd have happy hours and discuss a lot of these issues we've been talking about today and the barriers that we were facing as Black women lawyers specifically, because that's what this group was. And we looked around and said, you know what, we can do something about this. We can help ourselves. We've got networks, we've got connections, and we can use those connections to help one another. And as we grow those connections and as we help ourselves, we continue to help each other. And then we help others by joining and partnering with organizations such as DAP. And so that's exactly what we did. We began to just put forth concerted effort to give each other business, job opportunities, nominate each other for awards, help each other with our resume. My bio was formed in a New Roundtable session where we sat there on a Saturday morning and we critiqued everyone's bio and said, nope, you need to delete that word, you need to add this word. I mean, we brought in recruiters to help with our resumes. We just started helping ourselves and connecting one another. And then we looked up 6 years later and we had GCs in the group and partners in the group and and judges and people who have helped one another along the way. But it started with us really investing in ourselves, and it's really paid off, and investing back into the community and into the pipeline.
I love that. That's incredibly powerful, right, when you think about the value of our network. So if I'm a law student that's listening to this and taking notes, get a pen, right? The things that I've heard you guys say is that research is incredibly important, right? As you're embarking on these various journeys that you don't know anything about, or maybe, you know, no one else in your family or your direct network has had access to. You need to research and figure out the path to get there. We talked about knowing your blind spots and your gaps and how important that's going to be to your success. We talked about how important it is for you to be confident and comfortable in making decisions, how you have to build political capital and know when to use it. We talked about, you know, the necessity of being excellent, right? Producing excellent work products. The idea of stopping trying to decipher, right, why people are doing or saying what they're saying and how they're treating you. And then the importance of empowering using your networks, right, and how those turned into DAP and they turned into the new roundtable. So thinking about all of that and where you are today, there were 3 tips, right, that you could give a law student now to be successful, right, or to strive in their careers. What would they be? Whoever comes up with them first.
Oh, go ahead.
Are you sure? You can go first.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I'm gonna keep it simple here. I'm gonna tell you the 3 tips we tell my daughter, who's 8, and we've been telling her since she was 3, and then I'll translate that into the legal profession and for law students, right? She's been playing sports for a long time. She's been playing soccer since she was 3. My husband is bound and determined to get her on that U.S. women's national team, and so she puts on a lot of hard work. But what we tell her, there's so much going on, so many inputs when she's out there on the field playing a game. You know, we say, have fun, try hard, be confident. And we keep it simple for her. And she always knows what are the 3 things. That's what she needs to think about. And for us, the have fun part is think about what you really love to do. What do you want to do? Not what someone thinks you should be practicing, not what you think is the most lucrative, but what are you passionate about? You know, what do you care about? What interests and excites you? Because that is going to motivate you. And by the way, that could be outside of work. You could be working to fund your other projects. You could be working to make sure your life is stable enough that you can go out and start a new roundtable and you can invest in your community, right? That's part of the having fun too, because you have a higher calling and a higher motivation around that. Try hard. That goes without saying. You've got to put the work in. You know, from law school on, you're not going to, we don't stumble into opportunities. You know, people don't just tap us on the shoulder and say, you know what, I'm going to give you my entire book of business, you know, just because. We hear about that happening at law firms, but not for us. We've got to put in the work, and we're more than capable of doing so. And then the be confident part. You know, I wish I could tell my younger self to be more confident earlier on. I mean, I have a type of confidence that comes with time, that comes with experience, that comes with seeing some successes and building on that. But when I first started out, I didn't have that. You know, I thought I could make it, but I didn't know I could. And so it makes a huge difference when you go in knowing that you got a plan, you've got a strategy, you're going to work that plan, and you will be successful, whatever that means for you, because that confidence shines through. When you walk into a meeting and you have a plan and you're very confident and you've done all your research and you've put the work into it, people tend to follow your leadership and it builds upon itself. And so that's the last piece I think that I would focus on.
That's great. Thank you. Tiffany?
Love those. Yeah. So, okay. So I think the 3 things I would tell law students, and that I still literally, I could like probably paste this on my mirror every morning and tell myself is, the first is like, get comfortable being uncomfortable, that you're never, the legal profession and your career is probably never something that you're truly comfortable in. And when you are, it's probably time to go. So, you know, you have to get really uncomfortable. You have to get really comfortable being uncomfortable. You kind of have to learn to live in that. And to kind of embrace that like there's always more you can learn. There's always a way you can grow. It's going to be uncomfortable, and how you react to that means more than anything else than what you're experiencing or what you're going through. The second thing is I would say, you know, fear, but really kind of like fear of like failure and failure for yourself. You have to get rid of that very early on. A lot of times, you know, I especially, like, I think about, I'm like, and I will, like, look at job postings or opportunities, and or people call me, I'll be like, I can't do that. And it's a fear that, like, you know, I'm inadequate or I will never be enough for something. And that's really not the case. It's really me holding me back. And so being able to deal with that and, like, look at things and say, that might be a long shot in your head, but so what? It's a shot that I take, right, every single time. And that no or not now, no doesn't mean no forever. It just means not now. And so being able to, like, push fear out of your mind, to push that, often at times for law students especially, but also attorneys too, like, your own internal fear will hold you back and keep you in a place where you shouldn't be. And so being able to deal with that. And then the last thing I'd say is, like, don't fight change. You know, change is something that is, like, ever constant in our personal lives, in our professional lives. What I try to do, like, very much so even right now, is I have to transform, right? Like, I mean, change is inevitable. It's always going to happen, but how I deal with it and how I transform through it is the most important thing. And so knowing, you know, yourself really well and knowing how you transform and how you pivot, that will serve you well as you climb the ranks, because change will happen. Your transformation will be necessary and needed in various areas of your life, and just being able to kind of roll through that and with that will help you.
Thanks for that, Tiffany. I'm checking the Q&A box. I don't see any questions that we haven't covered, which is good, because there are 2 that I have left for you in about the 6 minutes we have, if we can get through them. We haven't talked very much about mentors, right? And the good thing that we have is we've all, right, been successful in our careers and have these organizations that are doing really well. But there were definitely people who came before us and organizations, right, that came before us that were doing things that were somewhat similar, if not the exact thing. So can you guys talk a little bit about how mentorship has played into where you are now?
Yeah, you want to go first?
You want to go? No, you can go. I don't even have an answer.
Okay. I'm not sure I don't do either, but I'm going to talk anyway. Yeah, it has played a huge role. Coming from a person who, you know, my parents were wonderful and gave me every opportunity and worked so hard. But like I said before, I didn't know lawyers, right? I didn't have someone who was modeling for me how to be a corporate lawyer, how to be a general counsel at the time, right? And so that's where mentors come in. I would spend a lot of time just really studying people who were where I wanted to be in the future, right? And then speaking with them, picking their brains. I'd also spend a lot of time, you know, with recruiters who also can be good mentors, right? Because they see the market a lot and they know what people are looking for. But a tip I would give you, so mentors played a huge role for me. As you're seeking a mentor as a law student, make it as easy for them as possible. You cannot come to them with all the problems, all the issues, and just say, please help me fix this, right? That is overwhelming for the best people, right? Everyone's time constrained. They want to help you, but they can't, you know, do it all. So come to them with your plan and say, look, this is what I've mapped out for myself. I've done my research. I have this goal, and I'm going to take these 4 steps to get there. You know, what do you think? Or specifically, can you help me with step 2? I'm kind of stuck here. Can you introduce me to some people? Can you review my resume? If you will give them very specific asks that are discreet and they can do without a lot of time commitment, but in a very helpful way, people will jump at the chance to help you because they know that you're helping yourself, first of all, that you've got it together, but everyone needs a little push. Everyone needs some advice from people who have been there. And so make it as easy as possible and help your mentors to plug in where they can be most helpful to you.
That's great. Tiffany, I'm going to give you 90 seconds or less because there's a question in the Q&A that we have to address.
So I agree with everything Cassidy Henry said. I would also say that, like, my style of engaging mentors was very much so for them to see me work in some other capacity and want to invest in me. So I was not one who, and I don't, I mean, you might find people who you reach out to and they'll just automatically become your mentor. That's pretty rare. Most of the time, they have to have some sort of investment in you that's going to come from seeing you in action. That might be seeing you in action professionally, or it might be outside. So I know a lot of the mentors that I have now that I've had for a really long time is because they saw me as a really junior lawyer and a worker bee in Black Women Lawyers Association and Just the Beginning Foundation and the ABA, and they were like, oh, not only is she holding down a job, she's like actually trying to get stuff done. Let me pour into her, right? So sometimes you have to also, you know, it's a two-way street. You've got to be in service to something or someone, and oftentimes you will get mentors because they'll say, let me help her get to the next level. And so I just encourage you to not always be the person asking for help, that like if you're also giving help, giving back in some sort of way. I tutored for the bar for many years too, and people saw me doing that. So like it's people who just invested along the way, but I was always in service to someone else as I was asking for help on the other side.
I love that. Guys, this is probably the most important question and something that we deal with all the time in the work that we do with law students. And the question is, how do we navigate as law students for those of us who aren't excellent?
That aren't what?
Excellent.
I mean, from a foundational perspective, I think one, we need to have the perception that we're excellent, because excellence isn't static. It isn't that, you know, we shouldn't have, and we work on this with ourselves and with our kids, you got to have a growth mindset, right? Excellence and perfection are not the same thing, right? You can be excellent by doing what Tiffany said, always knowing where your gaps are, where your blind spots are, and addressing those and being accountable for those, and always driving toward growth in whatever areas you need to grow in. All of us is learning, each of us is learning every day. And so I would start by saying that comes with first a shift in mindset to I am excellent, I have gaps, I have areas for growth, and I'm going to seek mentors out to help me, and I'm going to put in the work to address those areas and get better and better.
Tiffany?
Yeah, I agree with that. I challenge that because I think there's something that everyone is excellent at. I think you might not know what it is because I will say, especially like growing up, like my parents gave me the world, but they were never trying to figure out what I was good at. You know, they were just like, this is what you should do, right? And so it took me as an adult to figure out like there's some things that I'm really excellent at. Like it's a reason why, you know, I graduated in a recession because I'm like really excellent in like dealing with like change and risk and like all those things. They don't faze me. I'm gonna keep punching, right? And so there's something that you're excellent at, and you've got to find out what that thing is, and you leverage that thing. You don't have to be excellent at everything to be phenomenal in your career and in your work, to be a leader, to be a general counsel. Like all these people, everybody has problems. They're not good at everything. But what they tend to do is they tend to leverage the things that they are excellent at, and they use those things to kind of drive the bus. And then things at the back of the bus are like the things they're not great at. And maybe they're not super organized. So they get a personal assistant on the side. And maybe they don't have enough time. So it's like I have a nanny and a nanny and everybody with my kids. I mean, they're doing things on the back end to manage everything, but what you see, right, in their package is what they're excellent at. They put that foot forward first. And so I would challenge you to figure out what you're excellent at and live in that and push that baby forward. And everything that you're not excellent at, you can 9 times out of 10 hire somebody to help you with. And that is what everyone's doing. I'm not a great cook or a great cleaner, but I have hired both, and my life runs based on assistance from other people in those areas that of my life where I'm lacking and I'm not excellent in. And so just know that that's how everyone great is operating, right? They're putting their excellence forward, and so find yours and put it forward.
Yeah, and if I could take my moderator hat off and just be a panelist for a quick second, I'd say 2 other things. One is that there's space for you, right? Whatever that thing is that you're excellent at, whoever you are and how you present, there's space for you in the legal profession. And you should feel empowered to be here and to start finding the network of people who empower you. At the same time, I think find the network of folks who are excellent at the things that you're not. right? Tiffany and I have been working together for almost 10 years. We are very different people and we have very different strengths, right? But together, I think we make a little powerful machine. And then we met Chastity Henry and we were like, oh, she has all the things that we're missing, right? She's the other person that we've been looking for. And so I think that you can also start to build your network and get around in close proximity to some of those people who have the skills that you're looking for, and you'll pick up some of those for sure. So it is 3:02 p.m. We are over our time. Tiffany and Chastity, thank you so, so much for sitting down, taking an hour out of a Friday, and really sharing some of your insights and experiences with this group of attendees. For everyone attending, thank you so much. We really appreciate you. To Cyfarth and to everyone at the Belonging Project, thank you for the opportunity just for us to share and for finding us valuable in this conversation around advancing diversity and inclusion in the profession. And we hope that everyone took something away from this that you can utilize regardless of where you are in your careers. So thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.